Hi, Paso Robles. I'm here at the beautiful Paso Robles Inn near the koi pond, having an iced tea and thinking about how lucky I am to live in a place like this. Been thinking about when I first got married, my wife and I watched Huell Hauser a lot. In fact, when I turned 30, my wife wrote him and he wrote back and included an autographed picture, Huell Hauser. So if you're of a certain age and demographic, you know Huell Hauser really well. He made a show called California's Gold. But I never thought that I would one day try to copy him in a small time level here in Paso Robles. Serendipity is a beautiful thing. You don't see how things are going to connect until later on. And that's what today's show is about. This house is part homage to the spirit of California. It's part portal to Florence, Italy. It's a beautiful museum of a house, and I feel so honored to show it to you.
Projects that I'm working on now is the historic Rios Caledonia. So I, in January, closed down my nonprofit called the San Miguel Resource Connection and took the money out of that and put into the historic Rios Caledonia for the new lighting in the museum that's going to be happening hopefully this year. And I'm redoing the displays, so I'm doing a lot of cutout life-size characters that are going in displays, and then we have a new entrance going on to the property, so that I have painted characters that also go into that entrance. So it's going to take on a whole new look and a whole new feel. We're going to finally, for the first time, tell the story of the historic Rios Caledonia. So it's about celebrating the families and the businesses that were in the building from the late 1700s. So the building was done about the same time as the San Miguel Mission, and it was overseen by a Mexican sergeant for the Mexican military, and his name was Rios. So that's how it got the Rios Caledonia. The Caledonia is from a Scottish family, the Nigrans, who moved into it. They were the first family to live into it, and it means welcome. Telling kids about the situation of today, I would tell them to literally, deep inside, is filtering through the information that's available and understand who you are and where you are and how lucky we are to be here on the central coast of California. We live in one of the most beautiful places in the world, one of the most caring places in the world. We have people on a regular basis here that do phenomenal things for the community. And we have kids that do phenomenal things in the community to make a difference. To me, international travel is a necessity as much as it is moving around within the country. The love of the garden comes from my mother's family, not my father's family. And the hollyhocks in the garden are 6 generations from my dad's mother's family, and which are the big tall things that are just starting to bloom. The joy and love of gardening was something my mother shared with my brother and I got, I think, the best part of it. He was more interested in going around the fields in circles with my dad, and I was more interested in helping my mom at the house. So the white poppy there that you just passed is a Matilija poppy, which is what Spain brought to California and marked each mission with. So the state of California is finally bringing them back along Highway 101, the original El Camino Real that Spain put in place, basically. But this white poppy is that Matilija poppy. Those little pink ones on the ground are Mexican poppies. So I worked on it off and on over a year. And it's a classic Americana piece, which is not me and what I do. But it was about the girl waving the handkerchief and the cowboy and the little boy going fishing and the neighbors working on helping build a fence. I did it, finished it back in 2009. One of these days soon I'm going to be replacing the windows in the house, and when I do that I will have the house re-stuccoed and this will go away. So one of my jobs here at the ranch was I had to chop kindling to start fires in the cast iron stove in the kitchen. And so we cut lengths of wood this length, and then I had to chop this into little pieces with an axe. So one day at 11 years old, I got bored with that process, and I knew my mother had oil paints out in one of the bunkhouses, which the hired hands stayed in on the ranch, and I got them, and I painted this on the board at 11 years old. And so that is what started my artistic career. And she hung it on the wall of the kitchen. My father just went, okay, who did that? And she goes, well, your son did that. And he goes, which one? And well, the younger one did it. And so about 2 weeks later, my great aunt, the historian, came over. She loved the board and she bought it for $5. So this is board number 2, because my mother said, okay, now you have to do me one. And so there it began. So by the time I was in high school, I was making $25,000 to $27,000 a year selling this and country landscapes of the area. So this is me doing watercolors at 11 years old. So I started to do watercolors. And then my dad, we came across a woman named Rosemary Ball who was teaching open air watercolor classes at Morro Bay. And she didn't teach children, but my dad got me into the class with me kicking and screaming all the way. I did not want to go. And so anyway, I went, and she changed my world. She taught me how to, at the end of the class with the first day with her, she came up to my dad afterwards and she said, he needs my personal attention. You need to bring him to my studio at least once or twice a month. And so we did that. Her studio was in Montecito near Santa Barbara. And my dad, back in those days, paid $250 for me to be in her studio for 2 days, Saturday and Sunday. And then we had to stay overnight down there at a hotel. And so my parents always took me down every month. We went down twice a month. So it was an expense, actually. But anyway, that is me without the lessons, and then there's other things that came after. So these are different eras. 2011 gold leaf. This I've learned in Italy. This is 2019 on a piece of stone, working with some clients. They were installing it in their bathrooms. This is how the Indians painted locally, which was with dirt and milk. So this is one I did for my aunt and my uncle when I was probably about 13 or 14. And then they both passed and they wanted me to have it back, so I got it back. This is 1978, and that's Italy, and an Italian rooftop tile from the northern part of Italy. I used to go up there during the summers with the family, and so I painted one there. And of course, my mother's service porch here, so when we built the house here, she wanted me to paint quails on blinds. So I did. So that's where it began. The animal heads are from my father's hunting. This one is from Colorado, and that one is from Canada, the sheep head. 2 artists that I used to display my work with when I was 11, 12, 13 years old. Thomas Goff, one of the local painters from Morro Bay area, and Ernie Morris from Templeton. So they used to get together in the park at San Miguel once a month, and they sold their artwork there. And my mother spotted them and asked them if I could come in and join them, so I did. So the first month that I took in my quail boards and paintings of landscapes and stuff of the art, I sold every single thing I had there in the park, and they sat there just laughed at me all day long. My mother left me there with them for the whole day, and they were total strangers to me. But anyway, I have those 2 pieces from them that are cherished gifts from them. And this is from 1911 that I found in an old homestead that I helped take down, and again cut the board out. And this was a Lord's Prayer piece that was still glued onto the old wood in the homestead. So rare to find anything like that and in that kind of condition. So that's one of my prized possessions, actually. So these are open market paintings. That's the first one that I did of that man. And he's called the Garlic Man. And this is the second one. So when my mother came to see my first major exhibition in Florence in a major gallery, I gave her that piece. This one came later. And these are from a recent trip that I took to Japan. And these are memories of Japan for me. I spent 3 weeks over there with a really good friend. We were with a small group of people that was very beautiful. Japan was exquisite. And so anyway, I did a kind of a series for myself, actually, not really for sale. And this is, again, part of and this is kind of my mother's collection of my life, actually. But the pheasants came along with the quails. And we used to go over to the San Joaquin Valley and hunt pheasants. And so that started that. And that's one of my open market paintings, which has kind of made me famous in Europe anyway. This piece over here is part of a series that I worked on for my open market collection. And it is the cabbage I grew here in the garden. It took me 30 days to paint the painting. There's 12 of them, so it took me 1 year to do the series. And when I go on tour with the National Museum Society over in Italy, these 12 pieces will be the calendar of the tour. So there'll be one for every month. So that would be the importance of that piece there. This is an old one, 1975, but this is open market. It's an oil painting. And so when I go on tour with the 250 paintings that I'll be doing a tour with the National Museum Society in Italy, they all have to have frames like that, which cost me $3,000 to put that frame on that painting. I have 250 of them to do. So I'm about halfway through that 250 group. So I got a ways to go yet. I realized when I needed to get some new computer stuff back there, my nephew took me to out buying all of that technology. And I needed to get those old photographs off of that wall or I was going to lose them back there because they'd been there 50 years and I was losing them. So I started to clean them off of the bulletin board. So in the process, me back over there, cleaning that off, my dad's picture with that piece of glass over the top of it fell off of the fireplace, hit the rock hearth, and landed out on the living room floor face up. So I came out here to wonder what the crash was, and it was my dad falling off the fireplace mantle. So I said, okay, Dad, I get what you're saying, but it's your stuff and you don't want me removing it, but I'm doing it anyway because I need to save it. So anyway, I live here with the spirit of them, my parents. This is Almond Blossom from my mother's garden series. This is my favorite picture of my mom and dad, my brother and I. So, yeah. This painting is the piece that I will be probably famous for someday. So it's called the Gypsy Lady painting, La Zingara in Italian. And I did it back in the mid-1970s in Florence, Italy. It took me 3.5 months to paint. And the gypsies were very colorful people in the market. They believed that if you took a picture of them, it took a piece of their soul, so they did not want you photographing them for any reason. But this is actually a very beautiful gypsy woman, which they are generally not. And they were dressed in these very colorful fabrics because there was inside of them laced with pockets that were sewn because their kids were running around in the market stealing food and pickpocketing, and then they would come back and put their catch in their mother's pockets and her fabric on her clothing. And the wealth of the family was always adorned and worn by the female member of the family. So that's how they carried their money. They didn't have money in banks or anything. They bought jewelry with it, and the wife would always have the jewelry on. It was always real. It wasn't fake jewelry. And so they were extraordinary, and my curiosity about them was extraordinary. So this was a picture that I took. The old woman, I found out later when I got the painting done and I took it down to show some friends of mine that what I'd been doing, and they recognized Margherita from the market, And so she came to see the painting. She cried when she saw it. She kissed the top of my hand. And she said, finally, somebody sees the beauty of my life. I've lived and worked in this market 90 years, and you have finally seen the true beauty of the market. I cleaned it up. I took all the garbage out, and she was impressed by that. But anyway, the painting was brought back here to America. It was sold for $12,000, and that person died. Their estate sold it. I had a business partner who bought it at an auction house in Santa Barbara when that estate was sold, and it was given back to me as a Christmas present. So it was meant for me to have in my lifetime. I've never attempted to ever sell it again until the House of Dante requested it to be put into a museum in Florence. And so then the National Museum Society requested it for a museum in Florence. So that's where it will go one day. So more of my Mother's Garden series details. This is me going back to my youth again. This is me at 13. A picture that I took of my dad's harvest team out in the field up behind the house here, where we raised grain. We were dry farming family. So it was about whatever rainfall we got for the year is what grew. And my dad's grandmother was very good at it, and so was he. So he learned all the tricks of the trade, so to speak, and this was his life. So for me, this painting was torture because he saw things that the way they were supposed to be on all the mechanics of all this that I didn't see. And so, because I was very young, and so he was always dishing me this amazing, not good things. And so when I got it done, I said, Dad, here's the painting. It's yours. So that Saturday, he took me down to San Luis Obispo to Graham's Framery, which was the only framery in the area at the time. And he bought this ready-made frame from Mexico and put on the painting. And then he drugged me, kicking and screaming, mind you, to the fairgrounds in Paso Robles because the fair was getting ready, and he put this in the county fair against my wishes, which took best of show at the county fair when I was 13. So I got a $500 award for the best of show prize for this painting. And mind you, never heard the end of it from my father. But anyway, that's what that means to me. But this is the house I grew up in as a kid. And so this is down the canyon a ways. And so this was a watercolor that I did when I was 15. I was taking lessons from Rosemary Ball down in Santa Barbara at this point in time. So I was getting better at it. Yeah. Classic me with no teeth. Posters from my first museum opening in Florence, Italy. So 2001 is when I began with the House of Dante in Florence. And this opening was at the House of Dante. So my work has its own title in Italy. It's called Il Mercato Fiorentino, which is the Florentine Market. So this is the indoor part of the market. I spent 40 years painting the market when it was outside in the city and not inside the market that it is, no longer even today. But this closet is filled with my artwork, what I have here in America, which is about 125 pieces that, and I'm not gonna go through all these, but this is another one. So most of this series is all painted on Belgian linen with an acrylic paint, and then it's heat set, and then this is mounted to a wood backing and then framed. So it preserves it forever, basically. And his name was Silvio Lofredo, and he was my master's professor and oversaw my series of the open market that I'd been generating and getting into galleries with. And he was an extraordinary man. So when I had my first museum opening, he basically came to it. He'd had a stroke 2 years before, so there was 2 other professors that came and got him and brought him to my museum opening at the House of Dante in Florence. And so he made me cry, actually, when he came. So the interesting thing is he said, you know, over 60 years of me teaching at the Academy of Fine Arts, he said, wouldn't you know, the American from California would come and outshine all of the Florentines here. So he said, you bring sun to our lives, he said. Our dismal gray world that we live in, he said, you bring light to it because of what you do and the color that you provide in your work. So, and your hand has always been happy. So, and that's the greatest compliment that a professor can give a student, is that you have a happy hand. So I had a very steady hand, I still do. And he considered that my heart and my hand was more Florentine than most Florentine artists, which was a spectacular compliment. So this is a view from my house of the city of Florence. The Duomo Cathedral, the third largest cathedral in the world. So that's where I live in Italy. So these are the statues out in front of the Palazzo Vecchio in Florence, Piazza Signoria, which is the core of the city of Florence. So I am way back on the other side looking at all of this here. So these statues are still in place. This is, of course, Neptune, a replica of the David. So these are all part of a fountain in the city. But I consider this color scheme to represent the colors of Florence, how I see the color of Florence. So this is a piece that I did after I had LASIK surgery done on my eyes. My eyes were getting so bad from needing bifocals, and I had astigmatism on my eyes, so it was distorting my vision. And so I went in, as it's kind of a risky thing to do as an artist, but something my father would have done, was to go in and have both eyes done. When I did, it brought me back to the eyes of a 10-year-old, and in the last 17 years since that surgery, my eyes have never reduced or changed in 17 years. And as no matter what kind of surgery we have done to our eyes, they continue to grow and evolve throughout our lifetime, but mine in the last 17 years have not. So I'm kind of an anomaly here in the eye world of Pacific Eye Care here. But this is indeed one of the pieces that I did when I first got done with the surgery. So I was seeing color differently, and so I had to re-educate my mind to color, and it changed everything. And so it provided me with a new style of artwork that's considered hyperrealism, the drama beyond the photograph. So, and there's certain details that give you that effect. So I have taken color and added along the edge of things, which you wouldn't see in reality or in a photograph. And it can be orange or blue or purple or whatever, but you'll see that I've added that detail, which adds more the drama beyond the photograph. So this is my baker and his wife and their daughters at the bakery across the house from my front door in Florence, and they're one of my families there. So I had to have them in the tour and in my story of Florence. So this is that drama that came after that eye surgery and me back in Italy. So this is a piece that I did from my Japan trip. And so this is my signature, Steve Kalar, 2005, or is that 15? Project in Sacramento for 3 years. And I was the artist and the researcher for a development that they were trying to do. And it was a town of Locke, and it was about the Chinese workers of America that came and were the labor force here back in the late 1800s and early 1900s. So I had to do some work, and I was the guy doing the drawings for the architect and the paintings and everything for what was needed for the development project. So I lived downtown Sacramento for 3 years working on that. This is a piece that I did, which is Chinese. Oh, this is one of my workplaces in the house. And that, of course, is my vegetable garden out there. And so there's a lot of historical value to everything in here. So that's my scene out of my house in Florence, which I wake up to and go to bed to every day. This is my first self-portrait in 1974 that I did of myself. This is one of the entrance pieces that will go at the historic Rios Caledonia in San Miguel. And I have another one that goes on the other side of the entrance. That piece behind you is a commission from a client. It was a $20,000 commission. he was only able to come up with the original 10,000 and then couldn't pay for the balance of it. So I got the 10,000 and then the painting. He's never paid for the balance. The photograph over there is my dad's, Kalar, grandparents. And it looks like a little girl in the middle. That's my grandfather, George Washington Kalar. So that's the Kalar family. So my mother had just passed away, and I started doing these pieces because I had this huge floral bloom in the yard that I'd never seen before. So I started doing them, and gold leafing is one of the techniques you learn at the Academy of Fine Arts in Florence. So I started doing the background in gold leaf. So this is a swallowtail butterfly. So this is 18 karat gold leaf and the butterfly. Here's the pink rose piece, which is called Honor, which was a gift from my great uncle to his sister, my grandmother. And that is still out in the front yard. And this is a piece I did the last 10 days before my mother passed away. I've done it 3 other times. It's a copy of a painting done by a Russian painter in the late 1700s named Alexei Venantianov. It's called The Fortune Tellers. I changed the color of the garments and the pattern in the apron underneath the pillow. And the cards are an Italian deck of Scopa cards. I changed the jewelry and the color of the turbans on their heads. But still, the lushness and the beauty of the women is from his work. And I can't sign it, but it's a piece, and I'll never be able to sell it because it is a piece. As I was up waiting for my mother to take her last breath, I would paint. So it was something that I was able to bring to life during that period. So it means a lot to me, basically, that piece. These are my grandmother's violet collections. Some of them are over 80 years old. So this is one of my paintings. So this was carved by a friend of mine in Florence, Italy. It's a copy of a Renaissance candlestick holder. And I had it drilled and electrified. And then I had a friend over in Morabay, Kathleen, who created the shade for me with a silk giclée print of my work inside. And then it has silk on the inside and silk on the outside. So you have to turn the light on to actually visually see the painting. They're too expensive to sell, so I have 2 of them that I did for myself. So, and this is the same artisan that did this frame, and he's carving the frame for the Gypsy Lady to go in the museum show. And he will be doing a lot of the framing for my show on tour. Asia was to Japan here in 2015, I think it was. And so that was a thrill for me. Japan's beautiful, the culture's beautiful. Japan itself as a country is I could go and live there the rest of my life and eat raw fish every day and be happy. Otherwise, this is stuff from my grandmother. I don't even have my furniture in this room yet, except these 2 chairs. And that was my grandmother's secretary desk there. But someday the house will all change here. So it's what it is right now, and that's good.
Is that your mom right there?
That is my mother, yeah, and her grandparents behind her there. We were all for some clients here locally, and the colors were this. And so I came home, and instead of using the brush, I used the palette knife and created. So I like it. So I'm going to do some more here coming up. I've already sold it. That's why one of the reasons why I like it. I've already sold the piece. And so I have had kids, whether they're in kindergarten or junior high or high school, whatever class I'm in, many kids will ask me why I wear this cross, because I am a found believer of the Lord and God and Jesus Christ. And I believe that my life has been a miracle from the very beginning. Why on earth would I, in the woodpile chopping kindling, take and paint that quail board on there? Which eventually leads me to becoming the first American as a member of the House of Dante in Florence, Italy. How did I get to Florence, Italy? That was my dad pushing me. My dad didn't have any artistic background. He was from a working middle-class American family. He came home from World War II out of the Army, and he started working for his grandmother on the ranch, and that led him to marriage, kids, and surviving the kids and his marriage. And us working here, they had a lot of hired men they had to feed. So my parents were working fools. But my mother took my brother and I to Sunday school one time. My mother was a Methodist and Swedish Covenant Church. And my brother and I got booted out of Sunday school because we were shooting spitwads through a straw at each other in the Sunday school class. The Sunday school teacher said, "Fern, take your kids home. We don't want them here." So that was the end of that as kids. But as I have gone through my life, and it has happened over and over again, the miracle that has guided me to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing, has been God. And that's the only explanation that there is for it. And so my entrance into I was with clients in Italy. I was helping them restore their villa in Tuscany. First time I've ever done it. And I contact 2 artist friends of mine in Florence, and they say, "Oh my God, you're here at the perfect time. Do you have work with you?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And so I delivered it to them in Florence. They submitted it to the House of Dante, ahead of all of the other people that have waited lifetimes to enter in as members of the House of Dante. And I get in. I'm juried in. And then they want me to do this tour to represent the House of Dante and to rejuvenate the society in European culture. So how did that happen? And then I am to the stage where I'm now being hosted by the National Museum Society, which basically what they do is they're going to put my 250 paintings from tour into a permanent collection in the city of Florence that will be there forever. Because it is a historical documentation of a marketplace in their city that nobody else has ever thought about. And so how does that happen? That's a God thing. That's not me out there. I mean, it is me out there working and doing whatever, but literally those opportunities, where do those come from? And so that's where I've come to that belief in mind. So for me to talk to other kids about Christ and God is a must, actually. It's something that I do all the time. So in the many students that I've come across here in the area, actually, and I love doing the workshops that I do with schools and classes of all ages, and literally I would say some of my favorite classes are the 5-year-old. They just naturally respond to the paint, the colored pencils, the crayons or whatever, and if you give them a little instruction, they create magic, actually. And it's mind-boggling when you see what they're really capable of. As we get older and we get all of this stimulus from the outside world, whether it's our families or whether it's our friends, it's mostly from our friends that stop us and block us from being who we are. We're creative creatures. So it's not about everybody in the world becoming an artist. It's about that we have to creatively think about how we are going to live our day. And in this pandemic period, we've got to get very creative about how we are going to live our day. Because the bottom line is, without that creative thought process, because we're the only creature in the world who has it, so we as man have an obligation to that creative energy to make it be all that it can be. So my father's mantra for us as kids was, if you're going to do something, do it well and do it the best of your ability. So I have lived that mantra my whole life. And I think of my father every time I'm doing something, because I go, if I'm not going to do it right, I'm not going to do it at all. So, but doing is part of it. And it's what we do. We have to get out and do. So for me to have information that, mind you, I paid a lot of money for in my artistic education. And so for me to take that gift and to give it freely, and me to pay for the supplies, to pass on the possibilities of artistic endeavors, is an obligation for me. I have an obligation as a master at my trade from the Academy of Fine Arts in Florence, Italy, to literally pass on that information. It's not about me having a class and getting money for that class. It's about me taking that hard-earned, highly paid for education and making sure that I pass it on to other kids. So one of the best things that ever happened to me was a young man stopped me in a supermarket in Paso, Robles one day, and he said, "Are you Mr. Kalar?" And I said, "I am indeed." And he said, "You couldn't possibly recognize me, but I remember the first class you taught at Lillian Larson School in San Miguel." And I said, "Well, that would be Bugs in Artful Places." And he said, "Well, I was in 5th grade when you came to the school." And he said, "You couldn't possibly remember the drawing that I did." I said, "I do." was a pale blue piece of construction paper, and you drew a hornet on it that was exquisite. And I gave you a $100 award for that accomplishment. And he said, you did. And you helped me when I was a senior at Paso High, graduating from Paso High School. Well, the end of my junior year, you helped me put my portfolio together to submit to universities for my further education. So when he graduated from Paso High School, he graduated and went to Columbia University, the most prestigious art academy in the United States of America. He completed his education there and is now a professor at Columbia University in New York City. And that was a kid from San Miguel who did not have a hope of ever getting into that kind of an education. His parents had no money to provide that. That portfolio submittal got him into a full scholarship at Columbia University because he was brilliant at 5th grade. He was probably brilliant at birth. He simply needed encouragement. So that's one of my great accomplishments, is kids like him, that I inspired him enough that, he, as a professor at Columbia University, he goes to my website all the time to find out what I'm doing new and to check in with me. And that's a gift. My website is Steve Kalar. So it's all one word, SteveKalar.com. And you will find my life there. When I speak about my community and the things that I do for my community, I can't help but think of my parents, because both were actively involved in the community and service organizations. My dad was the president for Farm Bureau Association in the Salinas Valley for 15 years. He was the president of that association, and he helped make that association successful for the state of California. So my father was also on the school board at Lillian Larson Elementary School for the San Miguel School District. So he became, on his own accord, not without education, but who he was as an individual, a public speaker. And he was a very good public speaker. And so I took public speaking in high school, was very embarrassed about my ability. But now when I speak to classes and I speak to people, I think of him because it's who I am. I am the gift of the two of them together. And so they are what makes me who I am and what I do today. So how I think and how the gift of what I'm able to do out in the community today. So it's a big part of Paso Robles and who we are here in Paso Robles. And I try to fight as much for the community of San Miguel because I feel like they get left out a little bit. Because people from San Miguel, and especially the pioneer families of San Miguel, are extraordinary families that have gone through an extraordinary adventure for generations that I now live from the benefit of that in my family. And so it's my belief of who I am. It's my faith. It's my ability and my self-confidence as an individual. When I went to Italy, I realized, and living there, that I could go anywhere in the world. When I first walked onto the soil in Japan, I realized I could live here and be happily ever after, because it was so different and the beauty of it was so extraordinary that I realized that I could be me. And when you find out that you can be you in having faith in who you are, so I'm reiterating things that Norma Moy said to you, because that faith is everything in yourself. And sometimes we don't get it from our families, but we can develop it in our own lives, and it's important to do. Thanks for visiting the ranch today.
So thanks so much for joining me today. I hope you'll agree that Steve Kalar is a local treasure. And if you want to get in touch with him, or if you want to see more of his works, visit stevekalar.com. Bye, everybody.